Good morning, everyone. For those of you who didn't pick up an agenda, you can find them just outside the room that looks like one of these. So again, good morning. Welcome to Washington and the third Washington Methanol Policy Forum. For those of you who have come to us from out of town, you're lucky enough to have arrived just in time for a taste of Washington's infamous summer weather. I think we hit a record yesterday at 95 degrees Fahrenheit. My name is Greg Dolan, and I serve as the CEO of the Methanol Institute. In 1989, a number of methanol industry executives decided to form what was then known as the American Methanol Institute. They were driven by a desire to work with the U.S. Congress as it began debate in the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990. The act would include provisions encouraging the use of alternative fuels and establish the reformulated gasoline program. Today, some 28 years later, the Methanol Institute is a truly global trade association with offices here in Washington, also in Singapore, Brussels, and Beijing. Many of our members are here today, representing the world's leading methanol producers, distributors, and technology companies. They come from Texas, Louisiana, New York, Michigan, Washington State, among others. And they've also traveled here from around the world, including Canada, Australia, New Zealand, China, just to name a few. 4 years ago, the Methanol Institute formed a global fuel blending committee. And that committee was charged with providing guidance and coordination for efforts to promote the use of methanol as a direct transportation fuels in markets around the world. Lessons learned in markets like China, Australia, Israel, Europe, and the United States must be shared to address the common technical hurdles that to the expanded use of methanol as a transportation fuel. In the United States, the committee provides advocacy leadership for adoption of the Open Fuel Standard Act and similar legislation by the U.S. Congress. And we'll hear more about those legislative initiatives throughout the day. In Europe, MI fields a strong team to maintain the current allowance for 3% methanol fuel blending in gasoline under the EU's Fuel Quality Directive, and to assist in the introduction of methanol fuels across EU member states. So currently in Europe, you're allowed to blend 3% methanol in gasoline, and that is being done in some markets in Europe. In China, methanol has been active for years in providing technical support as methanol is used in light and heavy-duty vehicles in both low and high proportion fuels. The committee is also helping to inspire and coordinate fuel activities in Australia, Israel, New Zealand, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, Trinidad, Malaysia, Vietnam, Iceland, Oman, Egypt, India, just to name a few. Last year, as the International Maritime Organization, the IMO, was drafting more stringent emission requirements for all seafaring vessels, MI formed a Marine Fuels Committee to oversee this historic opportunity for methanol's use as a clean-burning marine fuel. The Marine Fuels Committee has led MI's efforts to promote methanol's uptake as a marine fuel, from our partnership with Swedish firm Scandinavios on the conversion of a pilot boat in Sweden, to our FCBI Energy report in 2005 on methanol as a marine fuel, which was the first report that really captured that issue of using methanol as marine fuel. We also released in 2015 a methanol safe handling and safe berthing technical manual. With our technical and regulatory work, we've been looked at and working with entities such as the IMO, Lloyd's Register, International Bunker Industry Association, and the China Classification Society, again, among others. The Marine Fuels Committee also leads MI's liaison efforts with industry leaders in this sector, some of whom, such as Stena Line's MAN Diesel and Turbo, you will hear from today during this event's first methanol vessel fuel blending panel. Now, we are gathered here in Washington again to mark the renewed interest we are seeing in the use of methanol in the United States as a transportation fuel. 3 years ago, the shale gas revolution was less established and was just beginning to impact the methanol industry. As we will hear from our first panel today, domestic methanol production is in resurgence. And in the near future, the U.S. is expected to go from being a net importer to a net exporter of methanol. This resurgence means more to the U.S. economy than the availability of billions of gallons of methanol as a value-added product from natural gas. Each one of the coming methanol plant startups will create as many as 130 permanent, high-paying jobs, will create as many as 2,000 construction jobs, and together these plants represent investments of billions of dollars, the expansion of federal, state, and local tax revenue. These are the messages that resonate here in Washington, the nation's capital. Methanol production means investment, jobs, and tax revenue. Reintroducing methanol into the U.S. transportation fuel pool will help sustain and build upon this momentum by creating domestic markets for new methanol production. Yes, some of this product will be put on a ship and sent to distant markets like China, where it's likely to end up fueling Chinese cars. But we believe this country can also incorporate methanol into an all-the-above energy strategy. Former U.S. Energy Secretary Ernie Moniz chaired an MIT study on the future of natural gas. That study concluded that methanol was the most efficient and economical transportation fuel that can be made from our vast and expanding natural gas resource. And those conclusions hold true today. Why spend $8,000 or $10,000 to add the capability for a passenger car to run on compressed natural gas when for just $100 US, that same car can run on gasoline, ethanol, or methanol? It can be done. There are no technical hurdles to using methanol in our cars, trucks, buses, and ships, and there are significant economic benefits of doing so. Congress can help. Congress can help by adopting measures like the Open Fuel Standard Act to create real choice at the pump. As Congress continues to reconsider the renewable fuel standard and recognize that there really is no viable pathway to get to 36 billion gallons today, a strong case can be made for a domestic fuel standard, creating an opportunity for low-level methanol fuel blending using abundant domestic natural gas as a feedstock. And we can do renewable methanol too. We'll hear more about that opportunity this afternoon and this morning. So we believe methanol is the clear alternative. We've assembled an outstanding group of speakers today, and we expect you to take an active role in the discussion. Give us your comments, ask questions, engage other speakers and each other. We've purposely asked our presenters to keep their talks focused so that we have ample time for each panel for discussion. So please hold your questions until each of the panelists is presented. Then please raise your hand to be recognized by the moderator. Wait for a microphone to arrive, introduce yourself, and then join the discussion. This forum will feature 4 panel sessions addressing first the resurgence of domestic methanol production, featuring a number of industry-leading CEOs. Second, current global methanol fuel blending initiatives, featuring speakers from China, Israel, and the United States. Third, a session on public policy drivers, featuring a discussion of current legislative landscape in the U.S. And fourth, a session on methanol as a marine fuel, featuring speakers from those organizations at the forefront of this exciting new opportunity for methanol. As we did at the first 2 methanol policy forums, members of the U.S. Energy Security Council will be featured in a panel discussion over lunch today. And this is a real who's who of government, industry, and academic leaders. Additionally, we will have an exciting keynote address from Weian Li. He is the Deputy Secretary General of the China Internal Combustion Engine Industry Association and a key advisor to China's Ministry of Industry and Information Technology. Also, I'd like to recognize my good friend, Professor Surya Prakash, from the University of Southern California. Professor Prakash and his Nobel Prize laureate colleague, George Olah, who sadly passed away this year, are true visionaries in the pioneering work in proposing a methanol economy. And in honor of Professor Olah, Surya will be presenting the first George A. Olah Memorial Lifetime Achievement Award to a very special and deserving recipient today, just before lunch. Just a couple logistics, speaking of lunch, it'll be served right here in this room, so don't go away. Our AM and PM breaks will be in a foyer just outside of this room. Immediately after today's forum closes at 4:30, we'll be welcoming you all to a reception being held immediately next door at the JW Marriott. And there we'll hear from Congressman Eliot Engel of New York, who's a sponsor of the recently introduced Open Fuel Standard Act. We'll give you directions to the reception at the close of today's program. Also, the presentations from today's program, as well as videos, we are video recording this presentation, will be available on the websites of the Methanol Institute, methanol.org, and at the IAGS website as well. Throughout the day, if you have any questions, please stop at the registration desk. We'll be staffed out there, and we'll be happy to assist you. Additionally, there will be English to Mandarin translation available throughout the day. And if you'd like to take advantage of this, there are headsets available just inside the doorway here to this ballroom. Later this morning during the second panel, and also again our keynote address just after lunch, there will be presentations given in Mandarin. And so English speakers should pick up their translation headsets for those presentations following our first morning break. This evening's reception, like our breakfast this morning, today's luncheon, each of the breaks, your conference handouts, speaker gifts, Our audiovisual and translation services have been brought to you by members of the Methanol Institute. And I'd like to thank those sponsors, Methanex, OCI, the Southern Chemical Corporation, SABIC, Mitsui & Company, and CEL for their support of the Washington Methanol Policy Forum. Each of these companies is well represented in the audience today, so please give them your thanks as well. One last piece of logistics, and I think I need to do the same, is please put your phone on silent mode. With that, it's my great pleasure to introduce our co-host for this forum, Gal Luft. Gal, along with Annie Corin, are co-directors of the Institute for the Analysis of Global Security, and also serve as advisors to the U.S. Energy Security Council. I hope you all enjoyed today's program. Gal?
Good morning. It's really, thank you, Greg, for a very meticulous introduction and for all the many years of friendship and cooperation with the Methanol Institute. It's already 15 years that we've been working on this, slogging along with trying to get the methanol story out. We are a small think tank here in Washington. Annie Corin, whom you probably know, who's been working hard on this event. Our focus is national security, international security. We don't buy methanol, we don't sell methanol, we don't invest in methanol, we don't drink methanol. We are interested in the methanol story because we believe it is a piece of the puzzle of the national security story, the energy security story of the United States. And the reason is, and it's really important to understand it, particularly nowadays when there is, America is almost back to sleep when it comes to energy, that there's a great sense among many that our energy problem is solved. And that America is energy independent and we have the shale to solve all of our problems, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, but when you look at the numbers, you see a slightly different reality. First of all, you see that America still imports close to 10 million barrels a day of crude oil. So anybody that thinks that we are so-called self-sufficient, just look at the numbers. We're not, and we're not close to it, and probably we will never be when it comes to crude oil. And at the other side of the equation, you look at the Middle East. And the Middle East is an evolving story. This is where most of the oil is, you know that, and every time you think that you've seen the worst, something worse happens. For the past several years, since 2011, the Middle East has been an arena for proxy war between the Sunni bloc and the Shiite bloc, and that has brought to the destruction of at least 4 countries, Libya, Iraq, Syria, Yemen. By the way, all of them are oil countries. And that has been going on. We don't see the end in sight anytime soon. And just this past few days, we are seeing another split going on in the region with wealthy countries, where the wealthy oil countries fighting among each other. So it's getting from bad to worse. And this is something that affects our energy future. So unless you think that the Mideast is going to turn into heaven under earth anytime soon, we've got to be very, very focused on this issue and not to let go. Because we've been talking about this when oil was $20, we've been talking about this when oil was $150, and we're talking about this when oil is now, what, $40, $50 again. The problem is not going away because we need to diversify our fuel supply and to create a transportation sector that is more resilient, enables competition to take place. And methanol is part of the story. Not the whole story, but part of the story. And Greg mentioned that we have a shale gas revolution here. Yes, but you know, when you ask yourself, okay, so you have all this gas now, but what are you going to do with the gas? So for the past few years, and by the way, this is our 3rd forum, okay? We've done this in Washington. We've done it in 2012, 2014, and now 2017. So in 2014, when we had this forum, we were sort of in the beginning of this euphoria of gas, and if you ask people, what are we going to do with all this gas? They would say, what do you mean? We're going to be the Qatar of the world. We're going to build all these LNG terminals, and we're going to export, and we're going to defeat Russia. We're going to defeat the Qataris. We're going to take over the world with all the LNG. Well, 3 years later, there is one terminal that exports LNG, a couple more under construction. I don't know how many will eventually be ready to export, but if you look at the projections, we probably, by the year 2040, will be able to export no more than 20% of our gas, no more. So this LNG story is happening slowly, but it's certainly not going to be a major driver in demand. Then another story that was very prominent in 2014 was the CNG car, right? Remember Boone Pickens? Remember him? The plan, the lobbying, the bills, all this was on the media every day. How we all gonna drive those CNG cars? So I urge you to go and look at the automakers and see now 2017. How many, if I want to buy a CNG car today, I want to buy a sedan, okay, because I don't like to drive a van or a pickup truck. I want to buy a sedan. Not one sedan is offered today to the public that can run on CNG. And I'm not even talking about the infrastructure, where do I refuel? This is a story that you know. But the auto industry has not stepped up. There are altogether 9 models of CNG vehicles in the United States. Most of them are pickup trucks. As I said, not one sedan. Compare this to flexible fuel cars. You have well over 40 models, and many of them are sedans. Okay, so that's a much more advanced solution, and clearly the auto industry is offering it. So I think that because we are, when it comes to energy and vehicles and cars, we live in from fad to fad, from trend to trend. So we had the hydrogen story, we had the cellulosic ethanol story, we had the CNG story. Now, a new story, great story, self-driving cars. Everybody's going to be able to sit and read a book, and the car will take you. Yes, but what is it going to do to our fuel supply? It's not going to affect our demand for oil, because yes, maybe you'll have fewer cars. But those cars, the intensity of the use of the car will increase because the car will be driving around all the time. And this, by the way, story ties very closely to the electric vehicle, because if you have a self-driving car, it's not going to stop at the gas station and say, hey, it cannot fuel itself with liquid fuel. It has to be an electric vehicle. So then you have a whole set of issues with electric vehicles. And there's a lot of hype about this. And by the way, I'm a supporter, okay? I like electric vehicles, and we support them, but I think we have to keep in mind that this is not a very solid story, not because of the cars, by the way, because our grid is not designed today to support the recharging of millions of vehicles, electric vehicles. So we have to really have a very different grid, and that's not happening as quickly as it should. So we definitely need a liquid fuel solution, okay? The liquid fuels are not going away. They are a very important part of our energy future, and we look at the variety of liquid fuels that are possibilities. Methanol really shines, because it offers a way to utilize our natural gas. It ways a way to integrate itself into our existing refueling system. Has all the attributes, and I think that's why we have to get the story out. We're not very good at it. The story is still missing on a lot of people's radars, particularly here in town in Washington. Now, why is it important that we do this event today? Because we have to have a voice. The industry needs to have a voice. Unfortunately, I don't like it, but this is the reality. In this town, if you don't have a voice, If you don't have a seat around the table, you very quickly find yourself on the menu. And I'm saying it because now 2017 is 10 years since the last time we had an energy bill, a comprehensive energy bill. The last time was 2007, right? We worked very hard on this bill. But why industry needs to pay attention to what's happening in this town? All it takes is one word. One word. Somebody deletes methanol from definitions of alternative fuel, something like this, and it's over. And it's over. You've got to be very, very alert to what's happening on the Hill. Because if those guys don't know about the methanol storage, and somebody tells them, the methanol is no good, it's toxic, take it out. You're out of the game for the next 10, 20 years. So that's why Washington matters. That's why we are here. And that's why you should be here more often. And that's why you should talk to to your connections, to your representatives and the members that you know and cultivate relations with. Just like any industry, you need to have a presence in Washington. I don't like it, but this is the reality. This is how it is. This is the game, okay? And this is what we're trying to do through education, through briefings, through visits. There are a lot of folks in the think tank community that need to be still educated. So creating alliances, new organizations that are gradually discovering, and also showing the international experience, showing people what's happening in China, what's happening in Israel, what's happening in other countries, so they realize that this is not some fantasy land that we're talking about, but a real thing that is happening and you can see for yourself. So, as I said, the goal is for you all to feel that you are part of a growing industry, that methanol is back. And we're going to make methanol great again. Okay, so with your help, we're going to make methanol great again, and we will get this story out. And we will educate, but first of all, we need to create constituency. And this is what this event is about, creation of a constituency, a methanol constituency. Some people, when you talk to them about methanol, they think you're talking ethanol. Seriously. So make sure. You say methanol, yeah, it's not ethanol, it's methanol with an M. That's how precise you have to be when it comes to talking about this here. So I want to thank you all for showing your support, coming here. Of course, numbers matter, and I think that the fact that we have a full room at the National Press Club is a good testimony that we have a lot to work with. I welcome you all, and with this I would like to invite Steve Hansen from Raymond Jones to call the first panel. Steve is a stock picker, is an analyst. If you are thinking of going public with your methanol venture, be very nice to him. Okay, and he's been a very acute and very precise observer of the industry for years now, and he is, I could not think about a better person to run the first panel about the resurgence of the methanol industry. Thank you.
Just a little bit here. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the time. As Gal kindly introduced, Steve Hansen, I'm with Raymond James. I'm an equity analyst, so I do pick stocks covering broadly fertilizers and chemicals, but followed Methanex and the broader methanol industry for over a decade now and watched it evolve over the years tremendously, I might add. I've got the privilege this morning of helping moderate this panel. I'm going to invite up 4 speakers. We have a 5th, but I think he's still en route, so we'll adjust accordingly. But if I may, I'm just going to introduce some of the speakers here, or let me just give you, again, a bit of the backdrop here. So, you know, the context really around this is, if you've been familiar with the industry, is we've gone through a phase now where, again, the access to plentiful gas has allowed the industry to grow domestically. And we've seen a number of large assets go through both brownfield restart as well as new greenfield construction. And this is $1 billion of capital in each of these new facilities. It is thousands of jobs, both temporary and full-time, throughout the process. We've had, again, a number of facilities already restart domestically, but there's a number more on the way or in planning. And that's an important context here as we think, again, all of this is, again, to the benefit of the U.S. economy here, strengthening. So at the same time, the completion of these new plants is going to really bring forth a shift in the historical paradigm of methanol production. We've long been an importer here into the U.S. or North America. In the relatively near future, we'll become a net exporter. And that, again, will shift the global paradigm here for the broader industry globally and help reset pricing to some degree, I imagine. And so I think today, really the focus of this panel is to talk about some of this new production that's coming, the idea of around building new facilities here domestically, and what that could mean as we transition towards, again, a net exporter over time. To help us with all of this, of course, again, we've got 4 speakers at the moment. I'll bring them up here one by one. First speaker, Uday Taraga from ADI Analytics. Uday is the founder and CEO of ADI. Through his 15 years of industry experience gained at Conoco, Exxon, Booz, and ADI Analytics, Mr. Taraga brings deep commercial and technical expertise in oil and gas, coal, renewables, and chemicals. He specializes in corporate strategy, market research, economic analysis, and competitive intelligence, and technology assessments with rich domain expertise spanning oil and gas, coal, power, and chemicals. He has a PhD in fuel science from Penn State and an MBA from the University of Texas at Austin. Mr. Taraga, you can come up one by one here as I just introduce you. Second will be Simon Zhang, David Cassidy is number 2 on the list. David is Chief Executive Officer of ProMan, Chairman of Consolidated Energy Limited. Consolidated Energy, if you're not familiar, is one of the largest owners and operators of methanol production globally. Most don't know that. We've also got, and he's a very active, CL, very active in co-marketing and distributing chemicals, petrochemicals broad. ProMan is a leading EPC contractor specialized in methanol and fertilizer industries and is present on 4 continents now and in 12 countries with over 1,500 employees worldwide. He's a master's degree from Cambridge University in England. Simon Zhang is our third speaker, not here just yet, but I will introduce him for the context, so if he joins us along the way, we get some background. Simon is the CEO of Northwest Innovation Works. It's a company that intends to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in methanol production and the derivative products by using a new technology known as ultra-low emissions reforming. They are proposing world-scale large plants in the Pacific Northwest. He has over 20 years of experience successfully managing complex energy and industrial projects and has managed Northwest operations for the last 4 years. He's received degrees in chemical engineering from Tsinghua University, Purdue University, as well as the University of Wisconsin, a PhD, as well as an MBA from the University of Chicago. Our third speaker, very quickly, Mr. Sam Golan. Sam is Chief Executive Officer of Primus Green Energy, which has developed an innovative gas-to-liquids technology that economically produces the transportation fuels such as high-octane gasoline, diluent, or methanol directly from natural gas and other carbon-rich feedstocks. He's a seasoned general manager with executive expertise leading multinational engineering, project management, and manufacturing software companies right from the entrepreneurial stage all the way up to established market presence, as well through M&A and even IPO. He holds a bachelor's degree in economics and business administration. Sam? And then finally, but not least, Jonathan Schneider from the Solar Fuels Institute. Jonathan is a founding member of the Solar Fuels Institute, as well as a visiting scholar for Northwest University. John's primary focus is on government outreach. His past positions include principal and partner at Norabachi, an alternative technology firm based in LA. He's been VP of Energy Risk Management at Goldman Sachs Asia and Managing Director of Astral Group based in Singapore, Switzerland. John received his BA from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and his MA from in public policy from Johns Hopkins. Just very quickly, if you just give a round of applause for our, John, sorry, come on up, give it for our speakers. Again, the format here is going to be very brief presentations by our individual panel members, 5 to 7 minutes roughly in that time frame, and the intention here is really to get into a Q&A format thereafter so we can really dig into some of these key issues again around this domestic methanol resurgence. I'll try and keep everyone to time if possible. Uday is going to start us off here with a little bit longer presentation to really frame the argument for you around why domestic methanol production is important, and then we'll get into the other gentleman thereafter.
Good morning. Thank you for being here, and thank you to the Methanol Institute for the opportunity to share some of our work here. For those of you who don't know us, we are a boutique consulting firm based in Houston. We've been around for about 9 years. We focus exclusively on oil and gas, energy, and chemicals. Within those market segments, we work across the value chain. So within oil and gas, for example, we do a lot of work on the upstream side, midstream, as well as downstream. The natural gas value chain is an area where we bring deep expertise. We've spent a lot of time on the upstream side looking at where all the gas is coming from, but we've followed the gas molecule through the value chain, and over the last 6-7 years, we've spent a lot of time trying to understand where all that gas is going to go. And that's an area that we tend to describe as, in our jargon, as gas monetization. And as part of that, we spend a lot of time trying to look at what kind of an impact will this availability of natural gas in North America have on the methanol industry. So very quickly today, what we're going to talk about is what does the availability of natural gas mean for the methanol industry, and second, what does the methanol industry mean in terms of impact on the U.S. economy in general. I think Greg put it very succinctly this morning that it's important to kind of frame the impact of the industry in terms of jobs, tax revenue, and overall economic impact, because those are words that resonate in this part of the country and have a pretty big impact in terms of how policy gets set and how that has an impact on the overall growth of the industry in general. So I'm hoping to leave you with 5 key messages today, just at a high level. We'll talk a little bit about the diversity of applications for methanol. I think this is important because this is one reason why methanol as a gas monetization option, as an option to take natural gas and convert and do something with it is very attractive, is that diversity of applications. There's diversity not just in where methanol is used, but also in terms of the growth rates that people are seeing in terms of some of those applications. We'll do a very quick review of the new plant announcements around methanol that have stemmed essentially from the availability of natural gas. We'll talk at a high level about the impact a typical methanol plant has in terms of jobs, economic impact, tax revenue, and things like that. And then we'll take an aggregated picture of what the overall impact of these methanol plant announcements and this growth in methanol capacity in the U.S. is going to look like for the U.S. And then we'll wrap it all up with a look at some of the key states that are likely beneficiaries of some of this expansion in capacity. So just at a high level, if you take the various applications where of methanol, you'll see that there's a lot of diversity there. Unlike, let's say, some of the other things that you can use natural gas for, methanol offers a wide range of applications. You can take methanol for the traditional chemical feedstock applications like formaldehyde and other applications that methanol has been used for a long time. And then in addition to that, there's a very wide range of fragmented applications, whether it's used as for wastewater treatment or it's used for other solvent applications, both at the consumer level as well as the industrial level. So there's a pretty diverse range of applications where methanol can be used. That is interesting because that allows you, that diversity in application makes methanol a very attractive gas monetization option, especially if you look at the diversity by which natural gas is now available in North America across all the different shale plays. So essentially, you don't necessarily have to conceptually aggregate all of this gas, bring it to a central point, and build a large at-scale methanol plant. Conceptually, you can build small-scale methanol plants where small volumes of natural gas, you can produce small volumes of methanol and still find local applications, local end users, local distributors who may be able to monetize these supplies. So I think that diversity is one factor that makes this interesting. And then, of course, this in no way diminishes or impacts the opportunity associated with large-scale methanol plants, because there are large applications that continue to grow, whether it is in the use of methanol as a potential fuel, either for automobiles or for marine vessels, given some of the new regulations that are coming on stream around sulfur reduction in marine fuels, or for other applications around, say, use of methanol as a feedstock to produce olefins and therefore insert itself into the petrochemical value chain. So we've heard the shale gas story many times, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. Just a couple of key points. You've seen the dramatic growth in shale gas production over the last few years. What a lot of people don't realize is that the production of natural gas is in many ways right now constrained by demand more than necessarily by supply. If you go to Marcellus and you talk to the operators there, they'll talk about how they've been able to cut costs by as much as 30 to 50% in some of the best operating areas that they have. So essentially, there's the opportunity to produce more shale gas, provided there is adequate demand. We've spent a lot of time trying to look at cost reductions in unconventional reservoirs across the US, and we find that the best reductions, even after the downturn, have happened in the Marcellus, which is the largest producer of shale gas here in North America. So there's much more runway associated with further cost reduction on the upstream side. And we've spent a lot of time trying to estimate how much natural gas is available out there that can be produced economically, and we think that about 1,400 to 1,500 trillion cubic feet of natural gas is available out there that can all be produced at less than $3 or $4 a million BTU. So what that means is if you take the gas demand that exists today and aggregate that over the next 30 years, there's enough gas demand, there's enough supply that you can supply all the gas demand over the next 30 years at less than $3 a million BTU. So for a lot of investors who are looking at new projects around gas monetization, what that means is that you can very safely assume that you'll have access to the natural gas feedstock at less than $3 a million BTU for pretty much the lifetime of the project at which you model your returns and NPV economics at. So this is clearly not, this is fairly obvious to the investor base, which is why we see the dramatic announcements around methanol capacity that have been made over the last few years. There's lots of plans that have been announced. We don't anticipate all of those plans to move forward, but we do anticipate some of these plans will come on stream and will have an impact on the overall capacity of the methanol industry in the U.S., essentially transforming it from a net importer to a net exporter. So just at a high level, when you take a typical methanol plant, it offers a wide range of economic impacts. We are assuming here a typical methanol plant of about 1.5 million tons per year. It's a capex spend of about a little over $1 billion, state and local taxes of around $35 million or so, annual natural gas consumption of about 45 billion cubic feet a day on an annualized basis. In terms of the jobs, essentially, clearly as there's a significant amount of construction jobs that are created, a lot of those construction jobs tend to be temporary, but the plant also creates a number of permanent jobs, close to 600, both direct and indirect. We can talk a little bit about some of the details associated with those, but the overall economic ripple effect is about $1.5 billion based on a typical methanol plant. So when you aggregate that across all the methanol plants that are anticipated to come on stream, it's a fairly significant impact. A lot of the permanent jobs that are created are fairly high-paying jobs, close to an annual average salary of $75,000 or so. So if you aggregate all of this across the industry and try to build an industry-wide view, what we are estimating is close to $12 billion in capex. So we're starting from 2015 in terms of the methanol capacity expansions that have been announced or are anticipated to come on stream. Our analysis doesn't assume every single methanol plant is going to come on stream. So we've made some assumptions in terms of what's going to come on stream and what's unlikely. And collectively, the market, the overall size of the market, assuming that recent methanol prices prevail, is close to a little under $6 billion by the end of the decade. So again, pushing forward this aggregated view, if you take a look at construction jobs, which is the chart on the left, close to 19,000 construction jobs by the end of 2020 across all the various methanol plants. Direct and indirect jobs, when you aggregate them, close to 5,000 or so. So fairly sizable impact across the industry in terms of employment. Similar impacts that we see on the tax revenue side. There's some variability there, so essentially somewhere between $400 to $500 million in annual tax revenue through 2020. And we talked a little bit about the range of annual salaries for some of the direct jobs that are being created. In terms of the actual states that are likely to have an impact, again, we make some assumptions here based on what plans are moving forward and things like that. But really, the Gulf Coast is one of the big beneficiaries. Both Texas and Louisiana have pretty big, there's big impact of these expansions in both of those states. Louisiana clearly is where a lot of the recent capacity additions have been focused on. We anticipate similar benefits to Washington if some of the plant announcements there successfully move forward. So clearly across the board, there are opportunities to create fairly significant impact in some of the key states across the U.S. So with that, that's all that I had this morning to kind of set the context. Happy to participate in this discussion further. Thank you.
Hopefully I don't repeat too much of what was just said, but again, introduce myself, David Cassidy. I'm here in my role as Chairman of Consolidated Energy. We're one of the global leaders in the methanol industry with the #2 market share around the world. We've actually had onshore operations here in the US for over 20 years through our affiliate Southern Chemical Corporation. And that in terms of real infrastructure and terminals, storage, barges, rail cars, and so forth operating throughout the US. So we've been here for a long time and understand the industry very well. But with the advent of shale gas and therefore a competitive raw material for our industry, we've set about a large investment program. Via our subsidiary here, G2X Energy, based in Houston, we've already invested close to $1 billion and have expanded our operations directly into Colorado, Texas, and Louisiana. A little case study, the first thing we did was invest in a small-scale facility in the Texas Panhandle. This small plant cost $75 million to install. It's located in a community that had been ravaged by the deindustrialization. Celanese Corporation had large operations and had moved away. We've restarted that plant there and created 42 full-time jobs. And just looking at the impact on a day-to-day basis, apart from the original $75 million investment, there's still $2 million a year that we're pouring into the local community through salaries and direct overheads and spending, excluding the other millions of dollars that goes into materials, gas purchases, taxes, and so on. However, these small facilities are not really our long-term vision, and they're not the real solution. To be globally competitive, we have to think big, and you have to go for economies of scale, which is why we've already invested in the $1.7 billion project in Beaumont, Texas. Together with our partners OCI, who unfortunately can't be here today, we are building the most efficient, largest, and cleanest facility in North America. This morning, I just checked, we had 2,356 workers on site. So this is massive employment. It creates millions of man-hours of employment during the construction phase, and then, as mentioned earlier, permanent, high-paid, highly skilled jobs. Our follow-up project, which is called Big Lake Fuels, is already shovel-ready and fully permitted. It's of a similar magnitude and will be a $1.5 billion project in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Now, the reason for all these projects is the traditional uses. Methanol is a tremendous product and a building block in our daily lives in terms of being used to make part of something we use everywhere, every day, in your home, your car, in this room, in your offices, the carpet you're sitting on, the chairs, all made from methanol, plastic bottles of water you hear, all made from methanol. But I can't help that we're missing a trick here, and Greg's already hinted at it, and it's the reason we're here to discuss everything. And that's because methanol is a wonderful fuel. It's a clean-burning oxygenate that doesn't emit a single particle of pollution. And just as an example of how efficient it is, it used to be used in 100% formulation to run NASCAR. So it clearly works in the fact that cars also go very quickly with it. But interestingly, America has all this great shale gas and not using it as a fuel. Yet population of the world, 25% of the world's population, countries representing 25% of the world's population, are using it today in their cars on a daily basis. Again, I can't help but thinking we're missing a trick here. You could have the entire life cycle from the shale gas to manufacturing methanol, creating a huge economic boost, into a clean-burning transportation fuel, creating economic and energy independence. So just to give you some high-level numbers, because as people who know me, I like big numbers. If we were to use just 3%, which, as I said, is being used around the world already, and add it to the 10% of the ethanol we're already using, substituting out foreign imports of less environmentally friendly gasoline with US-manufactured methanol from US shale, this 3% methanol would require over $13 billion of investment. That is none of the projects that were listed up there. Those projects are for traditional uses. A further $13 billion of investment would be required to meet this 3%, creating 60 million man-hours of construction work, 15,000 construction jobs, hundreds of high-paying permanent jobs. And this is the best part. $5 billion of US dollar revenues in the US from US products, close to $2 billion annually of natural gas purchases. Think of it over a 15-year life cycle, $75 billion of revenue for transportation fuel that's currently from imports. $30 billion on a 15-year life cycle of gas purchases, creating the demand that was already spoken about. There's some big numbers, but there's some real numbers. So I'm going to steal somebody's line, and I say, let's make methanol relevant again. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Sam Golan. I'm with Primus. Nice presentation. I don't think it's mine.
Hold on. All right.
Yeah,
That's okay.
it's fine. That is.
That is yours. There we go.
Thank you. Almost there. Not really. Getting there. Swear I didn't touch anything.
Oh, it should be there momentarily. Here we go. It's here.
All right, thank you. A little bit about Primus, and I'll try to be quick and efficient as time is getting shorter. Primus is a, clicking here probably. We are an American company. We're based in New Jersey. We started our activities in 2007, and we are gas-to-liquid technology developer. Our technology that we developed from start to finish is for gas monetization, and we make gasoline, we make methanol, of course, and other liquids that are based on natural gas. We are 35 employees, and we already submitted multiple patents about our technology. Focusing on why it's attractive to do what we are doing, and we are talking about small-scale, prefabricated solution. We, as a small scale, when we are utilizing low cost or free or even negative cost of flare gas or associated gas, even stranded gas. We can use also pipeline gas when it's attractive, and then from this we make the product, either methanol or other liquids. We are also in offshore product, close to here, sorry. We awarded by ABS, which is American Bureau of Shipping, to be an offshore technology. So definitely offshore solution for flare gas is very attractive. And we're already working with a couple of partners on those kind of solutions. Talking about the benefit of small scale, and it is usually served in an area that you have advantage when you have a low-cost natural gas or you overcome cost of transportation. The key of our technology, the way we approach it, it's prefabricated in a shop, it's tested, transported to the site, and erected there in relatively shorter time. It's 18 months from project start to full production. The methanol that we make is an IMPCA grade, so it's as required. One of the advantages that we provide when we talk about a small scale, it can be also serve as a purpose-built plant. When you have a site, a customer chemical plant that has, I call it underutilized syngas or feedstock, and they need product like methanol, it can be delivered there in a shortened time, and they can, of course, produce for themselves the methanol. The GAH, the gas house, it's very small. It's actually not exist at all. We use new technology, and that's one of the biggest approach that we have on the small-scale methanol product. If we look a little bit into a couple of projects that we are, call it, underway in different stages, you can see that we have in Alberta, talking about methanol plant in Marcella, which we'll talk a little bit more about it in a minute. In the East Mediterranean, we're talking about offshore methanol plant on a platform. In North Dakota, we have a process that going for gasoline from coal gasification. In Quebec, Montreal, and other projects. I think I would like to take you more to a practical way of where we are when we talk about the advantages and talking about Marcella, where you have, the shale gas available in attractive cost. And when you go to an existing facility with a lot of existing infrastructure, like we are talking here in Marcella, so we are looking to start to put this plan in place in a very short time. And in this case, we are talking about first train that will produce about 160 tons per day of methanol. And then following that, we will add additional new 2 trains. So in total, we will have 480 plus 160. So it's going to be a very nice plant. Now, the advantage, when we look into this place, and this is in chemical plant that shut down production line, we have availability for very good infrastructure. So for us, the investment on OSBL is relatively low. And we can utilize whatever they have there to serve our facility and make this product very attractive. So as you see here, we have partners that offtake, and we have the EPC that's going to do it, and we hope to start this project in the next, I would say, 2 months or so. So again, summarizing it, we have no time, I see it. It's a small-scale, prefabricated, built in the US. It's a US product. And we look forward to multiple projects to do in methanol and other downstream of methanol in North America and other locations around the world. Thank you.
Okay, so we're waiting for it to come up. My name is Simon Jan. I'm the CEO of NWIW. And instead of talking about project, I'll just say we are actually building a large methanol project in Washington State. But we can talk about a little bit offline. So I think we have a lot of all these smart people here. So I'm talking something a little bit more exciting. So this is what we call methanol. Maybe we can give it a more exciting name. We can call it liquid sunshine. So what that really means, if you take a step back to see everything we have, like a fossil fuel, that's actually fossilized sunshine. If you're looking all the biomass, it's really solid sunshine, fundamentally from photosynthesis. Then if you're taking local methanol, it is actually a liquid sunshine, just a way of how energy can be carried. Let's see, go page done. Yeah. And thinking for energy, we are actually in a very exciting time for a very, very dramatic change. It's very exciting if you're looking at all the Silicon Valley every 5 and 10 years, you can see very things dramatic happen. For energy, typically you don't, because the lifespan is a lot bigger. But if you're really taking a way back, taking a spectrum over several hundred years, actually you can see the change is pretty dramatic. So before the Industrial Revolution, the energy carrier is wood. And then you get coal as energy carrier for about 100 years. That's where the first Industrial Revolution. And then you get a second energy carrier, electricity and oil for the last 100 years. And I think you can think what all the exciting things can happen. And then the challenge is, opportunities with all the shale revolution, with all the renewable power costs going on, with all the concerns about climate and environment. Maybe a new energy carrier will come out. I think methanol could be that new energy carrier. So the amount of opportunity it offers is fantastic. So that's 5 minutes, so I'll do it very quickly. So if you look at actually the map, you can see actually where's sun, you can see a lot of sun intensity, and just a very small portion of that could sustain a lot of world energy need. The key part of it, how to store it and how to transport it. You can see actually methanol could be as a very nice liquid carrier over a very tremendous amount of potential way of storing it and transport it. So taking another step back, if you're thinking as an energy carrier, I think everyone knows electricity is energy carrier. And then if you put in another carrier, a liquid here, and I think the world doesn't need anything else. Just think of that potential. And this is just for fun. We heard a lot about battery, but I think quite honestly, from scientific part, the energy density of a battery is actually quite low. This is really a result from MIT and a Chicago study. It's just to say on a levelized basis, what the cost of oil you need to be for the battery to be comparable economically without subsidy. And another big part people didn't realize, a lot of people didn't mention, is really the cost recycling, just like a nuclear. When I think 50 years ago when we used nuclear, people say don't worry about, in 20 years we'll find a solution how to dispose nuclear waste. 50 years down there, we're still looking for that solution. So and then in terms of how to making methanol, as I call it, using a cell phone analog. You can make it from any carbon source, and clearly the early generation made it from coal. It's pretty carbon intensive, pretty dirty. And then you made from gas is much better. And now actually you can do a 3G, which is you put in gas and power, renewable power. It's even cleaner. I think that's what we're doing now. And then you can do 4G, which is you putting some biomass there, which is really make it even cleaner. And ultimately the holy grail is if you can use biomass, your renewable power, to make this liquid carrier, then it's completely carbon neutral. Just think of the potential. And this is really the same thing. It's from the feedstock. You can start in from coal. It's very carbon intensive for something all the way to the right. You get completely use biomass, which is really atmosphere CO2 captured. And then you put renewable power, which is really another form of concentrated sunlight. Then you really, we can recreate Mother Nature in a very industrial way. And in terms of applications, and later on we have a session, I'm not going to go detail, you really can cover everything, just a whole set of applications. And then this is the same thing I said, so don't forget about the end part of life. So I'm thinking as a clean carrier, methanol, when you use it, if it's making materials, you actually capture all the carbon. So that's another way of thinking CCS. So you don't have to just stuck on the ground. You can make a material, so capture it permanently. If you use as fuel, your end product, CO2 and water, so it's very clean. The next one is just for sustainable development. I think is key part is every country, every people, every world need two things. You need economic growth, no matter rich country or developing country, and every country need a clean environment. So if you can find a good balance, that'll be very exciting. Oh, thank you very much.
So how do I change it?
Just click here. Just click here.
Click where? Okay.
Right here. Okay?
So if you can just put on the first slide.
Yeah. Nope.
Nope. Okay. Yes, good morning. My name is John Schneider. I'm a co-founder of the Solar Fuels Institute. Let's see. Oh, there we go.
There we go. That should do it.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. Yes, scientists would rather share a toothbrush than their data. Fortunately, we've made progress since the Nobel laureate physicist Murray Gell-Mann. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me? Sorry. Yeah. Since the Nobel laureate physicist Murray Gell-Mann made this observation. Acknowledging that an energy solution is unlikely to reside in any single institution or research lab, we established the Solar Fuels Institute through the Office of Research at Northwestern University as a global consortium oh, sorry, over on that side. Okay, thank you. As a global consortium of universities, government labs, and industry united around the goal of commercializing a liquid solar fuel. These are broadly defined as technologies that harness the sun's energy and store it in the form of chemical bonds. Our focus has been on what is commonly referred to as artificial photosynthesis, that is, using the sun's energy to drive two chemical processes, the splitting of water and the reduction of carbon dioxide. Many of today's renewable energy sources are inherently intermittent, which means that storage is a critical component to its adoption. And of course, there's quite a bit of focus now on grid-scale battery technology. But as an alternative, an energy-dense and carbon-neutral solar fuel could be a cost-effective way to store and use the sun's energy as a transport or heating fuel, a source of electricity, or a feedstock for the chemical industry. With the abundance of low-cost fossil fuels, however, there's little incentive to adopt new large-scale energy technologies that pose considerable upfront technical and economic challenges. Also, how do we bridge the gap between basic research funding, typically the domain of government and philanthropy, and later stage technology investment attractive to industry and venture capital? And how do we overcome an entrenched academic culture that measures success by numbers of papers published in prestigious journals in lieu of any societal impact? We have adopted a variety of tools, platforms, and pathways. Some have been more successful than others. With limited time, I'll focus on two. We have begun the construction at SOFI of a demonstration device that captures and converts ambient carbon dioxide into a high-value chemical such as methanol using exclusively solar power. The goal of the project is to prove the feasibility of a liquid solar fuels technology and also to serve as a lab bench for technology road mapping and techno-economic analysis of different solar fuel pathways. The device will be designed and built in a modular fashion so that the subcomponents can evolve, merge, or be replaced by new breakthrough technologies as they arrive. A second project is a knowledge platform designed to increase the use and value of scientific output reported in publications. The premise of this is pretty simple: to capture and curate important characterizations, experimental conditions, measurements of performance, et cetera, and categorize pieces of knowledge within the solar fuels research areas such as people, processes, content, and technology. The platform will enable users to more easily draw insights, analyze trends, and identify promising but perhaps understudied areas of the technology. It also has the flexibility to adapt to new or tangential areas of research. This slide shows a networking tool within the knowledge map developed in partnership with Elsevier, the publishing company. A global scale energy solution will likely derive from many sources and take many forms. Though grounded in solar fuels, SOFI is not wedded to any single technology. We must, however, acknowledge that a chasm exists between academic research and the realization of an economically viable technology that generates fuel directly from the sun. We recognize that market innovation in solar fuels will likely arise incrementally over time. We therefore have adopted a strategy to commercialize individual components of solar fuels rather than launching directly into a full liquid fuels value chain. This strategy will ideally shorten the gap between the lab and the marketplace by commercializing smaller scale, higher value applications of each component, which could then be integrated into a higher volume, low cost supply chain over time. There we go. Yeah. This is actually just a gathering, some gatherings of our scientists in Uppsala, Sweden, and Telluride, Colorado. I'll leave you with a quote from one of the greatest economist philosophers you likely have never heard of, Albert O. Hirschman. People undertake some new task not because of a challenge, but because the task looks easy. And once they are stuck with it, they have willy-nilly to overcome the unsuspected difficulties. And sometimes they even succeed. We believe SOFI is well positioned to address some of these great challenges. Thank you very much.
Great, everyone. Thank you all. It's I think we had a really good perspective here now, setting the stage for the economic potential and the impact, both from the perspective of the large existing scale producers as well as the smaller scale opportunities. But I want to open the floor to the Q&A now to all of you in the audience, whether there's any questions. I think there's mics running around, as Greg mentioned earlier. Just state your name and any of your questions so we can get it. I'll open just as you're contemplating questions, though. Just from the panel's perspective, is there anything that you really envision from the policy perspective that would help the demand sort of environment for methanol and really facilitate further construction of methanol going forward domestically? Dave, do you want to?
Okay. Well, I think the easiest thing is really to make a level playing field. It's not that we're asking for a special compensation. We're not asking for any incentives. We're not asking for tax breaks. It's just an even playing field. As Greg mentioned, the current scenario requires 10% ethanol in the fuel pool. We can't get there under the existing structures that we're trying to put in place. Methanol provides an almost overnight solution. It can be complementary, and as I said, the industry is ready to step in and provide it and doesn't need to be subsidized in any way.
Sam, is there anything from the smaller scale perspective that you might add, or Simon? And,
or maybe I'll just echo the key part. I would say to use methanol as a new liquid energy carrier. It doesn't really have any economical or technical barriers. Actually, barriers in policy is more in, I think, different part of interest group. So I think good example would be, I think, compared all the support for the batteries. I think it's great for unique applications. But I think for the large scale, it has its concerns. You had all the policy support versus for methanol. I think for all the benefit it's talking about, you don't. So I think the key part to really make an impact both economically and environmentally is to, as I clearly echo this one, is simply a level playing field.
And Corin at IAGS. This is for you, Simon. I mean, you're investing, you're building these. Is it on? Like he said it was. Can you hear me? You can hear me, right? You're building these, planning these gigantic plants in Washington, potentially Oregon, and you have tremendous support of Governor Inslee, and yet you got this massive, massive pushback from people in Washington State and so forth that don't understand the environmental benefits of methanol, don't understand that the perfect is the enemy of the good. Who do you think is behind the protests against your plants, and how can the rest of the industry and how can all of us in Washington that are working on this issue help the industry expand in the Northwest and withstand this kind of nonsense?
Okay, first I really, really appreciate because I think if you're looking on the environmental part of this big chunk, I think I could rational is good. But a few parts are actually completely emotional or radical. Because if you're looking, I think the key part is really have a unified, a broader alliance, from the industry, from the policy, from the academic, and from really, I think, the mainstream rational environmental community to really looking the impact and the solution. Because in the end, I think the two parts is critical. One is economic growth. I think every part, going back to you need economic growth. The second part need environment. I think actually environment is interesting. There's two components. One is if looking at most OECD country, everyone talking about greenhouse gas. But if you go into developing country, China, India, we're talking about environment is pollution. Because greenhouse gas may be a concern in 2 generations, but pollution will affect your life today. I think that is important. And then a key part is take the case of the Pacific Northwest. It's extremely environmental sensitive, very, very strong, local environmental concerns is in there. So the key part, what we're trying to do is a twofold. One is for the local region, it's more industrial. So clearly there's a lot of demand for jobs, for good, high quality jobs. That's great. And then for the broader in the region, I think the key part people realize greenhouse gas is not a local issue. So it's actually a global issue. It's actually by stopping the clean substitute, let's say in the case for coal methanol in China, extremely carbon intensive. by stopping or reducing it, you're not really saving the world on GHG or greenhouse gas. You're actually putting 10 times more in the air. And that one, 2 days, will flow across ocean to your backyard. So typically people say not to my backyard. By stopping it, you're actually putting more pollution in your backyard. So it's a really longer story, but I think the kind of the key answer to your is really, really broader correlations to really get the truth out of it. And then some of it is actually coming not purely from industry, because what industry is saying is always be perceived as biased. So it's really have the scholars, have the academics, and have the policy leaders, and have the rational environment community to come out and really tell the truth, I think.
I believe we've got one in the back.
Yeah, Mark Goodman from Eastern Research Group. Question for Mr. Golan. People have been looking at and trying to do small-scale methanol and Fischer-Tropsch plants for at least 40 years or so. Skid-mounted plants, this same sort of thing sounds like you're talking about. For a long time, when companies got serious about doing this, they found that the capital costs simply did not scale down. And a couple plants were undertaken, but they had to be scaled up to like 475 tons a day, and then they failed. What's changed since then that makes these things viable today?
Thank you for your question. I think I will answer this question from two different angles. First, we didn't take large-scale plant and scale it down to a smaller scale. We build it bottom-up, and we design it bottom-up, where we optimize catalyst process, and this is what Primus is all about. We have an integrated team from catalyst analysis and development up to commercialization. And the idea is to optimize those components all together, from catalyst up to the liquid fuel, either it's methanol or gasoline. And this is one thing. So we probably not 100% efficient as large-scale plant, but it's not just about the efficiency to get to 100% or closer to this one. On the other side, the idea is to utilize feedstock that it's available in a lower cost, or reduce or eliminate transportation cost into it. So it's a different equation. If you go to a flare gas that costs you zero or even negative, then your economics works. If you go offshore when you have stranded or flare gas, then your economics is working. And this is what our solution looks like.
Part of that was always part of the equation that all these other people were talking about too, although they always ended up paying a significant amount for the gas as well. I also have a question for Mr. Schneider. Why was Sophie's choice to do this demonstration product taking CO2 from the air rather than from some major source of CO2 emissions?
Let's see, well, that's a very good question, thank you. I mean, we've also, of course, explored flue gas, so that definitely is an alternative. I think ambient air gives us kind of a 2-for-1. We have a fuel source. We're also addressing climate change. And so, really the holy grail is to be able to get it out of the air. We're working with a company in Switzerland that actually scrubs ambient air and provides a source of carbon dioxide. Of course, we can, these are all subcomponents of a bigger system. And so even, in early tests using canisters of carbon dioxide, is what we have done. But clearly for us, the goal is to be able to take it out of the air. Does that address your question?
In the interest of time, I apologize. If I could refer us to the networking break right after, we could go on, but I'm just mindful of everyone's time here. I'd just like to thank the presenters this morning. I think really, if I just had to sum it up, I think the opportunity set here that they've outlined is nothing short of enormous if we can take the full advantage of the methanol's flexibility as a fuel particle, if you will, or future fuel, both from the large-scale traditional sense as well as the smaller scale options with as Sam has described. So we've got a 15-minute networking break to follow here shortly thereafter. I encourage you to come up and question the presenters. I'm sure they're happy to dialogue, and we will reconvene thereafter. Thank you.